Viewers, all eyes are on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in China's Tianjin, where the global Eurasian leaders just posed for the group photo. This after a 55-minute India-China bilateral, where Chinese President Xi Jinping told Prime Minister Narendra Modi that Beijing and New Delhi should choose friendship over rivalry and look beyond bilateral disputes amidst geopolitical churn. From the outset, this meeting has been historic. This is Prime Minister's first China visit in 7 years. And finally, the ties between the two superpower nations are stabilizing after the deadly border clashes in 2020. Bilateral relations and border issues were the core issues discussed in the 55-minute-long meeting. In his opening remarks, PM Modi welcomed the restart of the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra and confirmed direct flights between India and China would be restored soon. The Prime Minister also emphasized on mutual trust and sensitivity, saying interests of close to 3 billion people are linked to this cooperation. He's also asserted that ties between India and China have been improving since their last meeting in Kazan, and India is committed to taking relations forward. Xi Jinping also echoed similar sentiments, calling both the countries key players on the international level. The Chinese president has stressed that it's important for India and China to be friends and good neighbors, adding that the dragon and elephant must come together to preserve peace and prosperity in Asia and across the world.
Excellency, हमारे दोस्त के बड़े स्वागत के लिए मैं आपका हृदय से आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ। पिछले वर्ष कजान में हमारी बहुत ही सार्थक चर्चा हुई। हमारे संबंधों को एक सकारात्मक दिशा मिली। सीमा पर डिसएंगेजमेंट के बाद शांति और स्थिरता का माहौल बना हुआ है। हमारे स्पेशल रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स के बीच बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट के संबंध में सहमति बनी। कैलाश मानसरोवर यात्रा फिर से शुरू की। दोनों देशों के बीच डायरेक्ट फ्लाइट भी फिर से शुरू की जा रही है। हमारे सहयोग से दोनों देशों के 2.8 बिलियन लोगों के बीच जुड़े हुए हैं। इससे पूरी मानवता के कल्याण का मार्ग भी प्रशस्त होगा। परस्पर विश्वास, सम्मान और संवेदनशीलता के आधार पर हम अपने संबंधों को आगे बढ़ाने के लिए प्रतिबद्ध हैं। एक्सेलेंसी, चीन द्वारा एचसीओ की सफल अध्यक्षता के लिए मैं आपको बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। एक बार फिर चीन यात्रा के निमंत्रण के लिए और आज की हमारी बैठक के लिए आपका हार्दिक धन्यवाद।
Talk about the implications, what really we are looking at, given that all of this is happening at a time when there's a lot happening globally as well, economic issues and other equations that are changing. Joining us to discuss that with us is Gautam Bambawale, former Indian ambassador to China. Thank you so much for speaking to Times Now, Mr. Bambawale. India and China have had more than 20 rounds of commander-level talks. The question on everyone's mind is whether there's a possibility that our differences vis-a-vis this border issue may dwarf the discussion surrounding economic cooperation, or has the Trump tariff war and what his administration has described as sanctions against India changed all of that?
You're absolutely right that for the last 5 years, India-China relations have moved off the railway track, off the tracks, because of what happened on the military sphere in Galwan and even after that. As you and many of your viewers know, that a disengagement process has indeed taken place, where troops, Indian and Chinese troops who were in close confrontation with each other, they were almost eyeball to eyeball with each other in eastern Ladakh. That sort of situation has been quietened down. There has been some pulling back of troops, but as you know, there has been no de-escalation of troops, which means that the troops continue to be there in those forward areas in large numbers. They have not returned to their peacetime locations. So this is a situation where obviously peace on the borders is something which is very important to both countries, to India particularly, but also to China. And without having peace on the borders, the rest of the relationship gets negatively impacted. Now, that is not to say that the two governments should not move towards putting the relationship back on track. The fact that we are allowing people-to-people exchanges, visas are going to be made easier, direct flights are about to start, pilgrimage to Kailash Mansarovar has resumed already. All those are good measures, but eventually the fact is that there will have to be peace on the borders, on the line of actual control, without which the India-China relationship cannot move ahead.
Right. And Mr. Bambawale, it's not just our eastern borders, but our western borders also where China's role becomes very important, because China's proximity, patronage and support to Pakistan has also been a serious source of concern for India. And is the deeper India-China economic cooperation a realistic possibility under the shadow of, China's continued backing as well as closeness to Pakistan on multiple fronts? For instance, there was talk of China's role in terms of supporting Pakistan even recently during Operation Sindoor.
You're right. I mean, if you talk about trade, we must keep in mind that even after the Galwan incident, where a number of Indian military people, soldiers and officers lost their lives, India did not clamp down on trade. The people who have weaponized trade is Beijing, is China. They have stopped exports of rare earth magnets, of specialty fertilizers and tunnel boring machines from China to India. And therefore, even where trade is concerned, India will look not merely at words that China and Chinese leaders say. We will be looking for action. Unless some of these imports are resumed from China to India, we will see the writing on the wall and we will act accordingly. To talk about Pakistan, you're absolutely right. During Op Sindoor, it was very clear that China was not merely assisting Pakistan in terms of platforms like aircraft and missiles, but they were also giving them real-time information and cooperating with them on intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance.
Absolutely. And because, at the end of the day, Shahbaz Sharif will be part of the SCO summit. The China-Pakistan economic cooperation includes the CPEC, which includes projects in Pakistan, occupied Kashmir, which, of course, India, we know, is our territory, and this is what we said. And there is an issue of sovereignty and borders involved here as well. Now, is this baggage of the past as well as the present too overwhelming for any relationship with China, which may require an immense amount of trust?
Look, in answer to that question of yours, which is a very logical question and which many people in India, including yourself, have in mind, I would entirely agree that there are limitations to where India-China relations can go. There are limitations which are placed on the relationship because of the outstanding boundary question between the two countries, but there are also limitations because of the close, almost alliance type of relationship between China and Pakistan, and we saw a lot of that during Op Sindoor, of the kind of military intelligence, reconnaissance and surveillance capabilities that China had put to use and with which it shared with Pakistan. So all these factors put a limitation on the rate at which India-China relations can improve.
Right. Now, in the midst of all of this SCO summit and talk of how, there is a possibility of strategic and economic realignment as a result of Trump's actions, if not the SCO, which includes Pakistan, are we looking at the potential of BRICS emerging as a powerhouse, because both India and Brazil perhaps have been stung by the highest 50% tariff slap by the Trump administration?
Look, let me put it this way. India has always been a member of BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization for many years now, and many decades almost. So we will continue to pursue that line of diplomacy, but I think we will also continue to pursue our diplomacy with the United States. It's very unfortunate what has happened, the 50% tariffs that you referred to, but we will keep our lines of communication open with the United States and with Washington, D.C. also, which is not to say that India will cave in to the pressures and the demands of Washington, but we will continue with our diplomacy towards all these different actors on the global stage as we move ahead, whether it is Russia, whether it is China, whether it is the Central Asian republics, or whether it is Washington, D.C.
Right. And, what is very bizarre is that, while there is all of this rhetoric, coming in from the United States about how it is Modi's war, not the Russia-Ukraine war, because we are buying oil from Russia. Yet, what they don't talk about is how China buys far more oil from Russia, but they have not seen this kind of a response. In fact, Trump's response has been far more restrained when it comes to China. Why is that? And how might that impact China's calculus vis-a-vis India?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're not wrong. It will impact on China's calculus vis-a-vis India. But also the fact is that this kind of logic is difficult to even understand. Because we all know that China is the largest importer of Russian oil. I think it's the fact that China had some cards to play. They had some chips to play with, which is in terms of rare earths and rare earth exports, which are absolutely essential to many American industries, many American industrial sectors, just as they are for Indian industry and Indian industrial sectors. So I think China played that card. There are already high tariffs by the US against China, but I think this whole logic of targeting India to get Russia to fall in line is very difficult to understand and seems completely illogical to me.
Right. And Mr. Bambawale, PM has been in Japan as well, and the joint statement there does talk of warn against unilateral action in the South China Sea and the East China Sea. Is this a clear message to China without naming it? And if so, it's not as though much could change overnight as strategic priorities between India and China's other so-called rivals do remain linked?
Absolutely. There's no doubt that these words in the joint statement point to China. There is no doubt that India and Japan will continue to strengthen their strategic partnership, as will India and Australia. And the fact of the matter is that, all of us are very aware that while China is trying to work towards multipolarity at the global level, it is also working towards unipolarity in Asia, which is not acceptable to countries like India, Japan, and Australia.
Mr. Bambawale, I'd like to quote you for the benefit of our audience about something that you wrote last month in the Times of India. You talked about how both the US and China were geared up against us in 1998 when we did our nuclear test. You've written that we had come through that testing time intact and with our national sovereignty uncompromised. This is a similar moment in history. India has to remain firm and still emerge stronger. This is a time for bravery. This is a time for clear-headedness. This is a time for leadership. So what do we do next, and what would all of this that you've mentioned entail?
So I think, the answer to your question is that even as diplomacy continues with all the major countries in the world, including, of course, the United States, there is no doubt that the people of India should prepare themselves for at least a little bit of pain because of the 50% tariffs levied on us. There will be certain industrial sectors, certain export sectors which will be impacted negatively. And I think we need to be able to withstand that kind of pain. We will have to tighten our belts a little bit. Hopefully it will be for a short run of time, but even if it's for a longer period of time, I think the people of India need to tighten their belts, need to be able to absorb this kind of short-term pain in order for the country to come out stronger in the long term.
Mr. Gautam Bambawale, thank you so much for taking the time out and speaking to us here at Times Now.
Thank you.